Hello, my name is Ryan Panzer, and I am the author of Grace and Gigabytes, Being Church in a Tech-Shaped Culture. I want to tell you a little bit about this book and also describe some of what you'll see in section 1 of the book, which focuses on questions. Now, Grace and Gigabytes tells the story of what it means to be church in a tech-shaped culture. I became interested in this topic of church and technology while I was working for Google and getting my master's degree from Luther Seminary. Now, as you might imagine, there's not actually a lot of employees at Google that are studying theology at the graduate level. But there are a lot of employees at Google who have had fascinating experiences with faith, spirituality, and religion. And they want to talk about those experiences. They want to have someone that they can discuss these ideas with. Here I think about one of my coworkers, Justin, we'll call him. Justin had a fascinating background. He had this experience as an Orthodox Jew, later a conservative evangelical Christian, who then left the church, became an atheist, then became an agnostic, and today is really active following Christian circles on Twitter. He doesn't belong to church, but he loves to have conversations about religion almost every chance we get. When I would talk with Justin, my coworker, when we would meet up for coffee or when we would meet up for lunch, I started to recognize that there was something that was foundational to Justin's faith or faith identity that perhaps was reflective of this broader tech-shaped culture. You see, Justin was interested in exploring his faith not just through learning facts or for hearing lessons, but through asking questions, the questions that aligned to his unique faith journey. So often, I think, churches approach this digital age as a process of fishing. You know, we want people like Justin to come to our church and perhaps to sit with us and to be with us. And I think in some ways that approach is backwards. Rather than fishing in this digital age, we should be trying to swim in these waters. You know, what Justin shows us and what so many of my colleagues in the technology industry have demonstrated is that there's this active interest in exploring faith through questions. That's what section 1 of the book is all about. Questions, or if you will, searching for God with Google. Now, when we look at some data from Google search engine, we can see that people are asking questions about their faith all the time, and they're doing it online. Searches on the search query, "Who is Jesus?" have actually quadrupled going back to 2010. There's been a similar increase for search terms on what is the Bible and what is prayer. The only search term related to religion that has actually gone down in interest is the term church. So what do we make of that? Well, just like Justin, there's a lot of people that are exploring their faith through the process of asking questions, asking lots of questions, and asking the questions that matter to them. As church leaders, then, we might respond by thinking about how we can become facilitators of sacred questions and not just keepers of inscrutable truths. Now, I like to think that questions, or the act of asking questions, is actually something that's foundational to what the church is meant to be. So this isn't a process of reinventing ourselves. More so, it's a process of clarifying what's always been there. When we look at the catechisms, we have this hundreds of years old tradition of asking lots of questions and then of debating those questions, of discussing them within community. Sometimes it seemed like in the Protestant tradition particularly, the faith has become a process of communicating, of preaching. It's been very didactic and a little bit one way. So how can we bring it back to the questions? That's what section 1 of the book explores. And I just want to name a few different practices that you might think of for your ministry context. First of all, I want to name the idea that asking questions about our faith life and asking questions of what God is up to in our community is a spiritual practice. And as a spiritual practice, it has a muscle that we can work, that we can use it or we can lose it. We should be training ourselves and our communities to ask the questions about our life of faith and about our walk with God. That's why I think apps like Evernote and Google Keep are so handy. because they give us a tool that's always with us, usually in our pocket, and we can use those tools to write down questions we're thinking about. Where is God at work in a time of pandemic? Where is God at work in a time of racial injustice? Where is God at work as I sit through this time of digital distribution and physical distancing and loneliness and languishing for so many people? Questions can be joyful, questions can be sources of lament, questions can be critiques and things that are wondering about at both the individual and the community level. Now, in addition to writing down the questions that are on our mind and encouraging our communities to do the same, I also want to think about the process of asking questions as part of the liturgy. We have all these digital tools that have suddenly become part of our worship service, and so many of these tools have different plugins that allow for conversation, multi-directional conversation, as well as for polling. What would it look like as part of our preaching, part of our worship service, maybe part of our announcements, if we asked questions of our communities, or if we invited them to send questions to us that we could then address as part of the worship service? The movement towards asking questions in the church is the movement away from a hierarchical, broadcast-based way of doing liturgy, of doing church, and a movement towards a multi-directional, collaborative, and network-based model of being Christian community. Questions is something that will help us to live into what it means to be the church in the digital age, but it doesn't actually require that much investment in additional technology. Like many of the ideas in this book, so much of what you'll find in this first section are ideas for low-tech and no-tech contexts. That's because being church in a tech-shaped culture, being church in the digital age, is less about the polish and the production of using various apps, using various resources. It's more about mindsets and intentionality. In the next chapter, we'll explore what it means to be a church that connects a little bit differently. We'll explore where those different patterns of connection emerge from and how we might respond within Christian leadership.